Welcome back to the Nautical Chronicle. I'm Clossington, and on this 90-degree, sweltering hot summer's day, I'm joined by the one, the only, Morgoth's Review. How are you doing, Morgoth?
I'm doing very well. I mean, I don't know if it's 90 degrees. Yeah, but it's pretty warm. In the UK, we're having a bit of a heat wave, and I don't know. It gets a bit. It's only about 22 degrees or something like that. But I don't know. It's like I'm reaching my limit already.
20.
It's like it's
Okay,
getting to be an emergency situation.
I had to do a quick conversion. 22 Celsius is like 73 degrees Fahrenheit here. That's what most people's like air conditioning is in the summertime here. Like not like 90 is like 32 Celsius. It's like I should be at the pool, but right now I'm building the CSS Alabama as usual. It's taking me forever just to rig this ship up. I hate rigging. I'm not a natural born rigger. It's it does give me a chance to have people on to chat about, I guess, more more nautically themed content. And I invited you on because one of the great shipbuilding hubs of the world is, of course, Newcastle in the UK, and it's like most heavy industry in the UK. It's gone quite downhill over the last few decades, since I guess the Thatcher era. Um, but I I've seen you cover, I guess, the gross excesses of safetyism and the depressing decline um, of industry in North FC. But do you actually is that a little bit of an understatement?
Well, no, it's all gone. I don't think it went because of the safetyism. It went before all of that. Before that
Hmm.
kind of it wasn't that it got suffocated with bureaucracies. People would say elements of the heavy industry, especially with the cars and stuff, that did happen. But it was just because it was kind of like the engine just kind of pettered out, and because the northeast was the main sort of driving force of the northeast was always coal, and so you had to find a way to get coal around. So everything about the northeast, the sort of the structure of it became just about transporting coal. That was number one. So you on the North Sea coastline, like Blythe, just up the road from me, uh, it was like a giant sort of power station. But it was
Right.
also when you go around in the northeast, what you'll see is that everywhere is just like these old train lines. Now mainly they're walkway. They call them the wagon ways because
Wait,
it used to be that
wait, hold.
everything about the northeast was just about how you transport coal, and the wagon ways would almost always descend on a port somewhere or other. One of them was Blythe, and then which is the coal. I mean, and then down on the Tyne itself, they would also go down on the Tyne, and then eventually they needed ships to go on. So the River Tyne became like a major area for shipbuilding. My dad worked there in the early 70s when everything was still up and running, when you still had the coal. But by then, he was making like oil tankers and things like that.
Hmm. Like how like I'm having Iron Duke on tomorrow to get more into, I guess, the transition from sail to steam, and to go over, I guess, the logistics of shipbuilding. But I have a sneaking suspicion that something happened around the Suez Crisis where the need to build, warships in the UK dramatically decreased, starting, post World War II. But I don't think the UK is even now known for being like a big shipbuilding hub. Like that's much more of like a Danish. like Maersk kind of thing, right?
Yeah, now there's just no shipbuilding or heavy industry in the UK, almost none left in the UK. So what you had was, like I say, the it's a fun. I wrote about this recently in a Substack article, which is that when you travel around, say, Ireland, where I've been on holiday a couple of times in the
Mhm.
last years, um, and if you go like to the north. And then what you'll see, there's this kind of marked difference between the Republic of Ireland and like the what people will call the mainland, but the Irish don't like that. And it's like this scarring of the Industrial Revolution is really prominent in like England and Scotland and in the north of Ireland. And in the Republic, you don't see it that much at all. And it's because relative to England, the Republic had almost no industrial revolution. And so this, what you find is that what to me was like normal, which was like living in this sort of industrial, and then by the time I was growing up, it was post-industrial. It was just on its way out. So you had when I was a small boy, you had like the mines closing and whatnot. And there was just this sense of like there was this major power center. And I mean it in terms of power rather than military, just of like shifting resources around, producing things, manufacturing things. And when you get into the 70s and 80s, it's just almost finished, pretty much. And then if you go a little bit further back, to the immediate sort of after World War II, that was when it was all being sort of given away. So eventually, you just had this the end of empire kind of hollowed out the mother country as well, because there was not really anything left to like there was nothing to do it all for anymore. So you and what's interesting, and I wrote about this a while back, just is that you can have another country in Europe which didn't really have that, which didn't really go through that whole process. And
And it
and
comes out the other end a lot better because it didn't go through the shock. Or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and it was because I came across a song, and it was he painted matchstick men and cats and dogs, which was an old song. I forgot the band. I did an article on it. I should have had it up on screen, but it was a kind of old classic song, and I heard an Irish cover of it, and it sounded very sort of folksy and optimistic and kind of uplifting in a way. But and I was like, and I hadn't heard the actual song for ages. And I thought, I know that song. He painted matchstick men and matchstick cats and dogs. And I hunted it down, and I realized, yeah, an Irish cover by the Furies. And I went and I looked for the original, and the original was English. And you had like this. I forgot the band now. I should have had this, so I didn't know I'd be talking about it. But
Mhm.
the in the English version, it's much more somber and nostalgic, and kind of almost like culturally exhausted and pessimistic. And one of the signs of that is that in kind of English culture is that they've got brass bands playing in their song. And so
Oh, okay.
this, which
It's more
didn't
weight to it.
actually, which didn't really have the in the Irish version, it didn't really have that at all. And the brass band is an interesting story in and of itself, because during the Industrial Revolution, you had all of these pipes, you had all of these brass works which go onto the ships and onto the trains and all that, boiling water and all of that. And so the people who owned the factories ended up encouraging working men in England in the north and around the industrial areas to form bands playing brass music. And the idea was to keep them occupied at night so that they didn't unionize. And This then became embedded within the British Empire. So it became like this military symbol as well. Like you'll find that you would have band. Well, I remember people marching through the streets, the jazz bands, and all of this. It became part of the unions, and it was in the British military as well. If you remember when we did classic movies on Man Who Would Be King,
Yeah, of
and
course.
you got little hints of it there as well. When there was Danny was when he was dying, he was going to go over the bridge at the end, and throughout you have that motif of the jazz, the trumpets and stuff, which speaks to home. It's a kind of signifier in the British mind for home and tinted with nostalgia. And all of this is a kind of historical scarring on the British sort of mindset, which another country, wouldn't really have at all. And I kind of found that fascinating to contrast that you've got these two sort of meta narratives, these two cultural identities, which are distinct within two kind of adjacent countries within Europe. Because I know now everybody likes to lump everything together as just being white. But I do find, which I can understand. I get all of that. That's fair enough. But it is important to remember that there is the identities are there, and there's these kind of cultural touchstones which kind of signify them all. And the industrial revolution in northern England is a specific, very heavy.
Yeah, I guess two different points, right? There's, I guess, first off, gotta have to mention the Man Who Would Be King. I'm sitting right next to my office bookshelf, and of course, I have to have my copy on hand. Uh, I have noticed that, I guess, sort of uh, early 20th century literature is a lot more musical than what a lot of people give it credit for. Like even the Lord of the Rings, right? Characters break down into song every once in a while. Um, with regards to the Man Who Would Be King, it does make sense for them to be nostalgic. Sort of stereotypically North Northumbrian and sort of Scots Irish soldiers being sent out to the far flung regions of the empire. It makes sense for them to have these triumphant um, brass band songs and to come back and be nostalgic about it. Um, right where I'm sitting right now in Pittsburgh, where I've heard horror stories of how the Rust Belt where I'm at right now is, I guess, it used to be sort of post-industrial hell where we used to produce some of the most steel in the entire world. Like the Homestead Steel Foundries used to be the most productive steel foundry in the world up until post World War II. But we don't have nearly as much of in a post-industrial folk culture or even much of a mourning. We just had crime, um, and we have, I guess, all that comes out now is sort of the post-industrial ogres like John Fetterman, like Senator like Fetterman, who's a symbol of this revived sort of hipster. I don't know. It's the Midwest or the Rust Belt used to be a lot rougher than it used to be, but now it's a lot more hipster and it's industrial centers. I don't know. We I don't think Northern England has had any more nearly as much of a revival in the last 20 years as the Rust Belt has in the US. It's interesting to hear. Um,
Well, you got this transition from the industrial, and then there was kind of like a collapse that happened, and then by the time Tony Blair comes in, really it began with Margaret Thatcher. You had the transition to a service economy. But on the which is it's just kind of crap. I just find it soulless and sort of just sort of barren.
You mean the fire economy? You know, is it finance, insurance,
Well,
real estate, and
yeah, it's just like sort of it's just making money off making money. There's no if you begin with a bunch of coal and some iron girders and cloth and cotton and things, and
Mhm.
by the end of it, you've got a ship. Then that is something. If you begin where you've got just a hole in the ground and then you've got like a big mountain of coal which can power things, you can see that there's something that is actually exists. Something that exists in the real material terms, which is going to go on and do things. And then when you go and you end up where one person's working in a call center and then the other person is like sits on a computer organizing the central heating systems for old people. Somebody else is in a supermarket. Somebody else is a taxi driver. And there's not there doesn't seem to be any kind of heart to it all. Like what is being actually produced? What's it all based on? And it just doesn't seem to be based on anything at all, which is probably why we're all swimming in debt. You get this sense that
isn't your big isn't one of your memes? You know, we're drowning in plastic and fried chicken, or
yeah.
whatever that maxim is.
Well, there was an older video that I did called "Deep Fried Human Nuggets," where
Horrific.
where you become sort of it's just like this mass and scale of nothing. I mean, to be fair though, you know, you got to be careful about not romanticizing the past too much, because obviously the industrial revolution was mass and scale of everything. Like it was about just in this sort of Heideggerian sense where you really are just boring into the world, like as Spengler said it, just forcing Mother Earth to give up absolutely every secret, every resource, everything that can be used to keep the fires burning and the furnace going on and all of the rest of it. So
Right.
there is like a sense where you got to be careful not to wax too much. But I mean, somebody in the chat, what I was mentioning earlier, that song, it was based on a painter, the Matchstick Men and Matchstick Cats and Dogs. It was based on a painter for the early first part of the 20th century, I think, called L.S. Lowry. And he did these paintings of the industrial North, particularly in Yorkshire and things, I think. And what you saw in his paintings were quite literally, they were very bleak, actually. I think they kind of rhyme well with current sentiments as well.
What was his name? I can
L
pull up
L
his. Yeah,
L.S. Lowry.
L.S. Lowry paintings.
And you can see that it's interesting to look at his work in like with what we're talking about, because there's a certain set of like the people have been dehumanized in a sense. They're just like, as you can see, they're just like little ants in this almost like apocalyptic landscape. It is like everybody's got their heads down and everybody's become almost just like tools of industry.
It kind of reminds me of Metropolis. I forget who was it. Lang who directed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
Fritz
was,
Lang.
yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of them, you know, shunting their way down into the factories.
Yeah,
Except, you know, brick instead of mechanical, whatever it was.
and he had no sort of training at all in painting and in art, and he just went out and did it all on his own back. Like that was just his style, and it became very popular because it spoke to something in people. And the kind of the wider art scene in London was very snooty and snobbish about it. They said he was just a rank amateur and all of that. And the song he painted Matchstick Men and Matchstick Cats and Dogs. is actually his life story. It's about him. And so they make the point as well that like he didn't get any respect during his own lifetime, but he did by the end of it. Eventually he did. But at the same time, what they've mixed in with that is the sort of the nostalgia of the brass band, which you look at those paintings and it kind of goes hand in hand with it all. The keen observer will notice that the Oasis song "Master Plan," in it, the band, like the Gallagher brothers, it's because Manchester was obviously almost like the heart of the industrial north. Um, and in the Oasis song, Master Plan, they actually replicate that style, his Ellis Lowry's art style, and then put themselves back into that sort of thing. And in their song as well, they also have like a brass band playing. And so it's this kind of lingering kind of nostalgia and yearning for the past, which is just so deeply embedded with the English, I would say in particular, mindset.
Well, like you were getting into, the the ruthlessness of industrialism, and I've recently been trying to get into Moby Dick. I'm about a third of the way through this great American epic, and I I was initially going to review it with Tierra Hudson and Christopher Sandbatch, but it didn't quite fall. It kind of fell through, but I kept on reading anyways, and it's there are quite a few, points to be made about industrialism as it was happening, and the sort of satire and meta commentary that Melville actually makes. I think in the very first chapter, Ishmael makes the joke, ain't everybody a slave or something like that, where uh, he jokes that just about everyone is some sort of slave to an occupation, might as well have like a good time going on an adventure. Um, but then later on, the little black cabin boy Pip realizes that he's worth less than the whale carcass, and in terms of like both dollars and moral value, it's it's kind of spooky. Um, but it's the sort of ravaging of the natural world is just another thing that I think you know Moby Dick hits on really harshly. Um,
Yeah, it's there's like page after page after page of like minute details of how they actually butcher the whales and what they're going to do with the blubber, how much the blubber is worth, and also that it's going to end up going back to power like the
like
lights at the
engines.
time, isn't it?
Yeah. Um,
It's
there
it's
there's
it's almost like you're taking this kind of majestic, giant, mysterious animal with like sort of almost mythical, supernatural qualities, which Melville ascribes to it, and reducing it to like a resource. Like oil would be 100 years later or so, and it's just, and of course, in the story, it is as if like nature and the metaphysical is lashing back. I think I mean I did a video on it ages ago where I said like Captain Ahab is a sort of quintessential Faustian figure where he has to tame he's driven on like a maniac, a literal maniac. There's no stopping him, and he ponders it in his cabin and all the rest of it.
like I think just about every big literary critic has asked themselves, what does the whale mean to Ahab? Like, I think it's very Faustian, but it's sort of low key satanic in the way that a lot of the story goes down. I think it's, if you want to take like the lens of ecology, it represents everyone says the whale means like God, the unknown. Why does Ahab hate the whale so much? I think it's the fact that if you get into like the original story in real life of the Essex, this whale ship that was this whaling ship that was taken down by a sperm whale, the most ravenous, extractive industry and profitable industry in the world, isn't supposed to have anything fighting back against it. You're supposed to be these. It's supposed to be a conquered human world, and yet the unknown, the unnatural, somehow finds a way to surprise him and um, maim him. That's not supposed to happen. These are supposed to be whales, like sea cows. You're not supposed to lose a leg or lose a ship from it. And the audacity for there to be something unknown to maim you and transform you and disfigure you, I think that's what really set him off. Just out of
Yeah,
spite.
and there's the famous passage of as well on the whiteness of the whale, where the whale is a blank canvas. It is like the unknowable and the infinite. But you're right as well about the ecological side of it, because at the end of it, of course, you've got one survivor who has to tell a story, bobbing around, and it brings them to ruin. And it's almost as if he's saying, like, eventually, this battle, this kind of disconnect with nature, is going to lead to ruin, because you're going to end up unmoored. You're going to end up uh, almost like, well, bobbing around on a coffin in the middle of the
That's
sea.
literally what happens.
Yeah, that's literally what happens. It's like that's what you're going to have left. I mean, just as an aside,
Hmm.
this week in the UK, we began the week with the passed laws where women can abort their babies like up to the point of birth, and we've ended the week with old, like, assisted dying. So if you're an old person and you want to check out, the state will kill you. So at both ends of your life, the state will kill you, because there's not really any kind of, you end up where you're just making up rules and laws as you're going along without really a reference to anything at all. And so in the case of Moby Dick, you can at least bring in, I mean, I know there's all kinds of religious themes in it as well, but you can bring it in like at the end, that's where we are. We're left just sort of bobbing around on a coffin with no unmoored, untethered. We don't have the ship, we don't have the stars to guide us or anything anymore of some kind of higher ethics. There's just nothing. You're just you're just all at sea as it is, with nothing to root you in anything or guide you at all, and so you end up in a kind of weird death cult.
Let's. I mean, isn't the slogan of the early like welfare state that they'll take care of you from cradle to grave,
Yeah, and
something
yeah,
like that,
from the
and
cradle, and they
it's
literally will now.
it's now they literally will. It's quite morbid.
I'm reminded of the scene on RoboCop when when they bring him back alive, and they're gonna fix him somehow. And I think it's his partner Nancy says, "What are you going to do about your memories or whatever it is?" And RoboCop says, "Oh, they'll fix it. They'll fix everything." And what he means is that the scientists and the technicians, they will always have a solution. He is facing a crisis of, is he a man or is he a machine? Is he alive or is he dead? And it's kind of like, well, I don't know anymore, but I'm sure the scientists and the technicians will just kind of come up with a solution on the spot. And that's kind of where you end up. That's what kind of where what people used to call clown world. I mean, that was already 7 years ago. I don't know what we call it these days, but we haven't even
It's
got a
now
meme
rather
name for
slop
it.
world nowadays.
Slop world.
It's a lot more sloppy and AI generated than it used to be.
I'm nostalgic for Clown World. I mean,
at least you know there's there's an actual clown there. Now you don't know whose brown hands typed that prompt.
yeah, that's true. So, and it's kind of weird because like we're expecting like there's already forever war in the Middle East, and you do get the sense, I think, that there's not really any. When they slashed all of this kind of the US aid thing, and then in the UK as well, there's not really any coherent sort of meta narrative that we all have to live by. Like, even if you go like in the height of sort of 2020 and the summer of Floyd, like even in the UK, we were getting statues pulled down and everything. And it was clear that the ruling elite had a kind of story to tell, even though it was horrible, even though it was like this social justice anti-white garbage. It was at least something. And I feel like now there's just nothing. It's almost like we are like entering this might makes right thing. In Britain, there's hardly even the pretense of us, because it used to be like uh, where you could pick apart the narrative, you could pick apart the paradoxes in the worldview, and how it didn't add up and it didn't make sense and it was hypocritical and all of the rest of it. But now it's as if they just can't be bothered to even sort of perpetuate that anymore. And again, like the end of Moby Dick, you end up just sort of bobbing around, like without any clear direction to things.
It reminds me of that quote from The Big Lebowski. Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, but at least it's an ethos.
Yeah.
Say
Say
what
what
you will
you
about
want.
Clown World, but at
At
least there's a clown
ethos.
there.
Yes, and Slop World, it's totally without direction. It's totally like just emptiness, just a void. And now I think we're expecting like Trump to the bombers are on their way to Iran, and I noticed as well that somebody was just before I went online, I think it was Richard Spencer.
Mhm.
He pointed out, like, when they made that Top Gun movie a few years ago, and everybody thought it was based. Everybody was like, "Great, it's
Top Gun Maverick."
yeah, it's like it's not woke. It's like it's got white male leads and it's great and now now it's like you can pretty much see it. It's like, yeah, it was like the mystery country was Iran all along. Surprise, surprise. And they even have like the sort of the bombing raid where they've got to get the, like Luke Skywalker attacking the Death Star. You've got to get the bomb in the little portal and all of the rest of it. And now that's just like going to be the news cycle tomorrow or something like that. And you can see like even even that was sort of half-assed and half done. Like, what was that? What is that? What were we going to have this kind of sort of based patriotism? But even that was just this cynical. Even the anti-woke was just this cynical sort of nudging and psychological operation.
So you're telling me that this military propaganda, rah American military movie, apparently this is all about getting us recruited? What? So you're telling me that the military propaganda movie was military propaganda?
Yeah.
Wow.
Surprise.
Surprise
Everybody. And all those what was it, like F-35s, and they've got like the beautiful sun going down and all the rest of it. And then at the end they got like they had to escape in one of the original, was it, I don't know much about airplanes and things. Was it an F-14 or something? The one from the 80s? I don't know, this is a nautical show, but basically, I saw last week that they actually had a bunch of those in Iran, and the Israelis bombed them. They were like, because they had been given them in the 1980s when they were like top piece of kit. They'd got them from somewhere, and they had them on this runway, and it was like the original Tom Cruise Top Gun fighter plane. And then they got bombed on the tarmac last week.
They really want to piss off the boomers.
Yeah, yeah. I bet that was just slop as well. I bet that was just AI made up slop as well. I hadn't considered that. Yeah, that was probably part of the op. But even the op is kind of tedious. Like it's we're literally on the like the 2002 2003 timeline, and I saw the other day. I remember that Team America World Police, and it was just that the makers of South Park did this satire in 2004 of this kind of neocon rah 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 thing. And it's just crazy. Like you kind of expect that when your position, the position of the regime, is being just lampooned like that it descends into farce, and then you have to move on, and you have to have a new story to tell, a new narrative, which I suppose they did with social justice and woke and everything. And now it's like all of those arguments that we had 20 years ago, which because I'm old, and I remember them all distinctly. I remember going into work at the time with a friend that I work with, and we were just talking about Team America and talking about bits of it and how funny it was and stuff. And then now it's as if that never happened. Now we're on a timeline that we didn't have, like the whole Team America parody just didn't happen, and we have to take it all seriously again. And I just find it so frustrating and so tiresome.
It's also tiresome, yeah. I do believe that that the Old Glory Club is going to cover Team America World Police for, I think, our 4th of July exclusive content. But it is a hilarious critique, but I do believe that it ultimately just comes down on the side of, yeah, they're was it the North Koreans are dicks, our liberal elite are pussies, and or who's the asshole? I don't. The metaphor is very
I think
Mm-hmm.
the assholes are like third world dictators. So in this case, the asshole would be like Ayatollah Khomeini, I would assume, and Vladimir Putin, I suppose. But it's a lot more fractured now. It's a lot more. I don't think there was a Tucker Carlson type figure as a counterweight back in sort of 2004, 2003.
I think the best thing the best that we had from like a more like right wing angle is Ron Paul, but that was, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, or 5-6 years after the wars were started, that we got Ron Paul on the main stage. I don't know. I don't even know what we have now as like the anti-war faction, right? I mean, I do remember you saw or you posted we need a new atheists to combat these
I didn't say that.
insane where are they called, like this dispensationalists. I'm paraphrasing. That's not what you said, but it's I can see the utility in, or I can see why that impulse was there back in 2001, but now we're 24 years later, and you still have these insane evangelicals saying that we gotta fight the great Satan Iran to defend Israel. It's
all the same.
Do we
It's
not
all
learn
the
our
same
lesson?
thing.
We had 20 years of forever wars and we lost. It's crazy.
I've been interested a little bit in sort of Keir Starmer, because obviously he's the most boring man in the world,
Mhm.
and I do get the impression that he in Britain, there's this sense of like we're just not in the. This is not like Tony Blair, and we were still in the boom times of the service economy, and in Britain as well. We were just coming out of the cool Britannia sort of bit. The mass immigration hadn't hammered us the way that it has now. The gates had just been open for a few years, and so that there was this kind of sense of optimism where you can feel kind of self-righteous. And now I look at like Keir Starmer sort of standing there with Donald Trump, and you can see he's thinking, I don't want to get dragged. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to. And of course, he's not a man that has much in the way of expression or personality or anything. But I do kind of get the sense that he's thinking, what's the base? What's the Muslims in like Bradford? How are they going to react to this? This is the absolute last thing, like the UK, as they call it now, like YOOKAY. Like we're not kitted out for war anymore. Like we just can't do this.
Well, it's very telling. You see the man on the street interviews where interviewer asks, would you fight for the UK, if called to arms, and almost everyone's like, no, either because they're foreigners who it's not their war, it's not their country, or they're the sort of woke leftoids who hate their country, won't fight for it, will just kind of sit there regardless, or they're patriotic blokes, but they've been hammered for so long that why would they fight in the Forever War just to come back for things to be gayer? Like the actual Forever War book depicted. It's farcical.
Yeah, that's literally I read the book a couple of years back. The Forever War book is literally about just everything turning gay while you're away like fighting aliens. It's crazy. I don't know, because I thought the Forever War was just like somebody in America had come up with that. Do you think they actually had read that book, or is that just a coincidence? Like that's very strange, isn't it?
Well, I know absolutely nothing about the Forever War book, but if I had to guess, I remember the anniversary of the Battle of Athens was not too long ago, and the Battle of Athens is this story of how during World War II, about 20% of the men in this small town went off to fight the war. And when they came back, this sort of political machine, this Democratic Party political machine took over. They enforced very corrupt, shakedowns and handouts, literally shaking down people on the street saying, you're drunk, pay us like $100 or we're going to arrest you for no reason. And when they tried to vote him out, the corrupt political machine, who had run down the town, encouraged all sorts of mafia-related gambling and pornography and crime. When they came back, they tried to vote these guys out, but the party stole the election, and it erupted into this sort of war between the veterans and this corrupt machine. I can imagine, Vietnam War vets coming home from Vietnam and seeing all these, goddamn hippies all over the place, and seeing the debauchery of the 60s. Or I could see it from the point of view of, these World War II veterans, sitting back and watching, the hippie movement get kicked off, and what the hell has happened to our country and these martial values? What happened to the clean-cut American GI? All their kids are rotten.
And
there's the old head World War II veterans, and then there are the Vietnam War veterans getting spit on.
Yeah, it is. Like, I mean, and now it's just all hippie. Now, if you have a society which is proud of itself, it has a sound identity, it has a good story to tell itself. You can have a little carve out for some like lefty crazies, and still kind of get men to go off to war. But eventually, that cancer will spread to the point where it's just hippies all the way down. And you know, if you've got hippies running the country, and you're not going to get men to fight for you anymore, and so you get this kind of like, well, our geopolitical mouth is like bigger than what we can back up with our body now, because we're just gay all the way down. The actual book, like what you described there about the Vietnam vets, that is literally just the book, except in the Forever War book, they're these kind of space marines, and they go off world and they get stationed, and a lot of it is to do with like times. So time on they like, because they're away from the world, they're on like a different timeline, so their time is moving differently depending on where you are. And I think it's that on Earth, time's moving much more quickly than what it is for like the space marines who are off fighting this alien war against aliens. And so eventually they come back, they go back to Earth, but it'll be like 25 years has passed or something. And every time they come back, it's just getting gear and gear, because you've got this huge
Quite literally, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you've got the reason given is that back on Earth has become this like one world government, and they've really gone all in on anti-natalist policies to try and get the population down, because the population was getting too much and the world was beginning to struggle. So you've got this huge push to get the birth rate down, and in order to do that, they've incentivized gayness. And when the sort of the main character, he comes back and he's just completely like a fish out of water. He's just bamboozled by it all. And then towards the end, there's like a love interest that he has, but yeah, that's the basic gist of it. It's funny.
Well, I wonder to what extent is this just it's the old aphorism, old boomers, decrying the youth for being, young and anti-patriotic and gay. But nowadays it is actually quite literally, statistically, that's what has happened throughout the war on terror. We were at war for a solid 20 years. Like, my entire life was just, we were in this forever war. Nothing happened, no progress, and backslide into, Iran hasn't or Afghanistan hasn't gone better. Just went right back to the Taliban. Iraq, it's just about as insane, but everything's blown up as ever. Forever war enemy. Iran is still there. We weren't able to fight the first time, but now we're just limping our way onto another forever war. It's quite literally insane. And I can't understand why anyone would buy into this. Like, it sucks. On I guess a little bit of a lighter note, I have to scroll up a little bit, but someone asked, what's Morgoth's favorite nautical novel? Because I have quite a few on my shelf, but
I'm just looking at my bookshelf. I would just sort of hedge my bets. I would say Moby Dick, because that is actually one of my favorite books of all time. I don't think I've read that many nautical books. I think it's something that I've always wanted to read more of. Is like nautical books. Yeah, I'll stick it safe. I'll say Moby Dick. I don't think I've read that many nautical books.
Like, I actually have very few on my bookshelf right now, but of course have to represent with Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander. It's a very nice little, like, 200-page read about the first adventures of Lucky and Jack.
There's loads of those books, isn't there, in that series?
Yeah, there's like 20 some. I started with Treason's Harbor, which is I think like 6 or 7, and then kept on going for a few more books, and I doubled back to the beginning. It does, but there are like half-finished books. It follows Jack from first book, Master and Commander, where him and the good doctor become friends. They have a little sloop. By the end, they capture a superior sized sloop or a superior French warship, but by the very end, his ship gets blown up and he's shipless again. It's a very nice little introduction read, but by the end he's a full admiral. um, I have seen the Hornblower miniseries, and I've always wanted to get into the Hornblower series, but it's it's like Master and Commander, where there are like 30 books, and I've heard Hornblower is a little bit more lenient in terms of jargon too. Um, but yeah, I won't say that I have a favorite one, but going with Moby Dick is probably um, a very safe.
It feels kind of boring and obvious, to be honest. I mean, recently I've been reading. I'm just looking over at the bookshelf now. I read Day of the Triffids was a good one, like a kind of British dystopian sci-fi thing, which is good, which is really good. About these sort of plants that take over the world. And then I've read T.H. White's Once and Future King. It's actually a trilogy. I read the first 2 books, and the book started to fall apart in my hands because I got a second-hand one. But I really enjoyed that one. The first book, which is The Sword and the Stone, is kind of a bit of a kid's book. But in the second and the third one, I'm still like the third one. I haven't all read it because the book fell apart. But it gets much darker, and they have these kind of discourses on sort of might makes right versus being like an idealistic king and this kind of thing, which is very interesting, which I didn't expect. And you get much more into the lore of Morgana and her sons and things like that. So that's the second book in particular is really great and really dark. And I've been reading kind of studying Cormac McCarthy, which is another sort of people in our sort of circles. As McCarthy's a big favorite, Blood Meridian, and at the moment I'm just finishing No Country for Old Men. There was something lingering. I think that's why I might make a comeback to video essays soon. I've got some notes and some ideas about all of that.
I remember reading Blood Meridian last summer, and if you really wanted to make like a video essay where you just quote mined Judge Holden, it's not a very hard thing to do. Just about every like story with the judge is a moral tale in and of itself that you could just wax poetics about. It's great.
Yeah, it is. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it's one of those ones where I read it last November and I found myself like going back and just picking it up and like opening pages randomly and just reading through, that's a sign that it's made it into my like all-time favorites. I also liked it because I'd been reading a lot of kind of political kind of theory cell type stuff, and I was beginning to get on my nerves, if I'm honest.
You just need a palate cleanser.
Yeah, and I've switched heavily back to fiction over the last year, which like a lot of people are kind of like, I know there's this kind of thing where everybody wants to discover some new thinker and then kind of crack him open and kind of convert all of his ideas into content and this kind of thing, And I've actually totally resisted doing that. I don't think I've done anything on T.H. White, and I haven't done anything on Cormac McCarthy or other ones. I read a book by just an English writer. It was just a sort of an action. It was like First Blood, but it was set in the like Dark Ages in England, called The Wolf of Wessex, which is quite
Huh.
good. So yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's like what I think I think you're totally right about Blood Meridian, where it's so minimalist and grug brained that it's almost poetic, where you open up a page and it's like, yeah, and then I saw something horrific happened, moving on, and then something else happened, drops profound quote, then something, we kept on traveling for a few more days, then we saw something horrific happen, moving on at such like a breakneck pace that
And
it's yeah.
he has like 600-word sentences. So
Yeah.
like I've never seen anything like that, where like it'll be like a whole page, but it'll be 2 sentences, and the second sentence will be 5 words long.
Hmm.
It's so it has this kind of, it takes a while, and then eventually your eyes kind of get your eyes and your brain get used to how the prose works, and then you find yourself just going along with it. And I feel like No Country for Old Men, obviously I've seen the movie as well, and I do find that's a kind of watered down version, but I've got like a kind of take on all of that, which I don't want to spoil for the moment.
Yeah, I see that someone suggested it's actually 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but uh, I did actually cover that with I did cover that book with Tara Hudson on Double Dealer like a couple months ago. Uh, I do actually have to recommend the movie, the '50s movie, more than the book. But
With Kirk Douglas.
yeah, I
Yeah, it's
actually
good.
like it. The book is kind of hit or miss a lot of the times, and it's a lot more coy with who and what Nemo is until like the last 20 pages, and then they just sort of lore dump on you, and all right, we're done. um like the climax of the book is stuck under Antarctic ice, and air is running out unless we make one last push to get out to the open ocean. um it's different. I recommend the movie more, but that's just me.
It's George Louis Stevenson, isn't it?
um Steven, no, it's Jules Verne,
Jules
French author.
Verne,
So it's
right? Because
mhm.
the I when I was like younger, I didn't. I would the reason why I started to got into books more was I was working in a factory, and then I crushed my finger under a machine, and I was off. I mean, if I'm looking at my finger now, I've still got like a big, like nasty scar on it. Like
Oh no.
it's kind of, it's still
Jeez.
got a big lump on it. Like, and decades later, and me fingers a little bit sort of deformed. But anyway, I was off work for like weeks and weeks with it. And I remember getting bored, and I found a copy of Treasure Island, and I picked that up and I began to read it. I got really kind of fascinated by it, and by the sort of the way that the plot linked together, and I began to think
Mhm.
this is very clever, actually. And then this was just like books lying around in the house, and then after that one, I picked up David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is a huge tome. And again, I began to get fascinated by how intricate the plot was. And the villain, Uriah Heep, who's like a real kind of sleazebag,
Hmm.
but also very clever and intimidating. And I loved the payoffs that you could get, where there was and how it would all be intricately put together. And that was when I really began reading a lot more. I moved from that onto Dostoevsky, because this is before the internet, or at least long before I had
Right.
the internet. And when I got all of these books, like the Penguin books and stuff, there would be a little introduction, but it was actually kind of totally spoiling the book, and it was kind of giving you some hot takes on what you were about to read, which I always found a little bit annoying, but I read them anyway. And what they would do would be to link up different books. Another one, I'll tell you how that happened, and it was the Pickwick Papers I read by Dickens as well. And that was how it was. And so the Pickwick, who is the main character of the Pickwick Papers, he's kind of this lovable fat buffoon who goes on wacky adventures around the south of England, and he'll stay in a tavern, and he'll get roped into like looking for a goose, and he'll have like an unfortunate altercation with old Mrs. Nettleby down the road and all of this. And I realized, I read the introduction, and after I finished it, which I thought was all great stuff, and they basically said it was a retelling of Don Quixote. It was basically just Charles Dickens doing Don Quixote, but it was in the south of England in the 1800s. So I read Don Quixote because I thought, oh, okay, one book was beginning to link onto another. And then eventually, just through reading the introductions, I realized what in my mind was the sort of trilogy between the Pickwick Papers, Don Quixote, and then The Idiot by Dostoevsky. And so they were all meditations on good men in bad worlds in one way or another, except the Pickwick Papers is least sort of serious. It's the lighter one, I would say, and with the Idiot being the darkest. But it's all to a theme. It's all, and the idea that you could have this theme, even just the concept in itself. This is this is before the information age where everybody's just saturated with ideas and concepts. And I remember walking around thinking, that's fascinating. The idea that you can be a good man in a fallen world. Like, what do I think about that? What is that? Just the idea of it. And then having 3 different versions to meditate on. And then from there, I just began reading more and more and more. And that was how I kind of got started, getting addicted to books.
That's a fantastic, I guess, story on that sort of ropes in the 2 different themes we've been going through, right? The fallen UK industry, good books to read, boom, the story of Morgoth. We
Yeah,
do have,
including a factory job as well.
yeah. I do see that we have a few miscellaneous comments. Are you ever going to cover Master and Commander at any point on your show with Endeavor?
You probably will. I would
It's
say, see, I try and avoid obvious choices, but I think it's inevitable that we're going to do that one day. But I feel like it's something that everybody's analyzed to death. There's certain key films that people mention a lot, and I just think I don't know what there's left to be said on it because everybody's done like stuff on it. But we probably will do it eventually.
Have you ever seen The Terror? It's a
Yeah, I have.
like a
I've got
Netflix
the.
miniseries.
Yeah, I have. There's 2 of them that came out that I get mixed up with. Is the Terror the one with the kind of phantom polar bear?
Yes, that's the one.
Because with Colin Farrell, isn't it?
Uh,
Is he-
I it's
because
I'm not sure who the actors are, but yeah, it's
there's
English actors.
there was 2 nautical drama set in the Arctic came out almost like within the same year. And at least to my mind, where I'm not up like on the latest dramas and stuff coming out. And there was one of them where there was 2 ships stuck in the ice.
Yep, that's The Terror.
Right. And then there was another one. Yeah, I'm sure there was another one as well, which maybe it was just All the Terror. I thought there was another one
Well,
set in the Arctic.
it takes a very strange turn where the first half is, survival. How are we going to get out of this predicament? And then the second half kind of turns into this like horror, like polar bear nonsense that
Yeah.
you don't. It's not nearly as engaging as a character study on what do people do when they're in horrific survival situations. Let's see.
Yeah, because the one was Colin Farrell in that one where he was like this big heavy and he rapes a cabin boy. Is that one? Because
I do not think that is the terror.
give me, yeah, I thought it was. Maybe somebody in the chat knows, but there was another nautical icy salty sea dog drama which was very much similar to the Terror, but it didn't have like mystical polar bears in. And Colin Farrell was in it.
The North Water.
Which
I
one
think
was it? The North. Yeah, that was
the
it.
North
North
Water.
Water,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. And I thought that was a great performance by him.
I'm just reading up on this. The final years of the oil trade. Yeah, I was like, was Colin Farrell in this in like heavy in the Terror and heavy makeup? No, I don't recall that at all.
No, it would have been North Water. I think
Yeah,
that was it.
the North Water. It sounds, it sounded interesting, but I'm all of a sudden you say, Colin Farrell raped some cabin boy, and I'm like, I don't know, man. There really aren't too many like decent it's nautically themed like shows or movies. I did, like, someone asked what GIF I used on Twitter, and it's Black Sails, but Black Sails is a very compromised, like, graphic retelling of the origins of Treasure Island, and it's epic, but it's most certainly diverse and gay, and you won't get better pirate action, but it's still pretty bad.
I mean, I will say I've just had a look at the North Water, and it isn't really explicit, but it's implied because it's like a whodunit, because the cabin boy gets ill, and when they're looking at him, they're saying he's been interfered with, and then Colin Farrell's character, he really, I think this is kind of a dry run for when he did the Penguin because he's really big and bulky. He looks, he's a tough guy. And he ends up going along and saying like he has like sort of he's got like a genital disease, and they're saying, well, that's funny because we saw that on that kid as well. But the basic premise is quite similar to
The Terror.
to the Terror.
Yeah. What is it? Someone brought up Kidnapped with Michael Caine. I don't recall seeing that one. I remember there's like a Disney 50s version, but I don't think that was Michael. Was that Michael Caine?
I think that is. I think that might be. No, I think that it's a Bonnie Prince Charlie thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, kind of. There's the 1950, 51, 50.
That's too early for Michael Caine.
Too way too early. Kidnapped Disney, 1960. No, it's way before Michael Caine's time. Let me see. I do have to kind of ask while you're here. Your profile picture is someone fishing. What type of fish do you guys usually catch around North FC?
Well, it was true, but to be honest, like me profile picture isn't a lot. Me dog's still here. She's lying on the settee over like the chair in me office over there. But I never actually caught much. But mainly it depends when you go. I'm a better gardener than what I am a fisherman, and it galls me to say it because I've always fancied myself as an old salty sea dog. But if it would be mackerel in the spring, which I got some of them. I got some flatties, and I got one cod. And then you would get your cod in the winter, but especially on the coast between Tynemouth and Blythe, was really famous for the mackerel, and you'd see people. The only problem is, like, everybody would go down to get the mackerel, and they were filling buckets of them, and then it kind of, it kind of stopped. But they'd go down with, like, in the old days, you'd go down with just a line and some milk bottle tops on, the foil. It was just anything that was shiny, you'd bring up the mackerel. And I do like it. It's kind of strange because I eat quite a bit of fish, and mackerel used to be considered so. I think it's a really nice, tasty fish, but it used to be seen as sort of like cheap. The ones that is a big hit, like up the road in Sea Houses, there's like an old fashioned smoking house for heron. So when basically you can go up there. So I forgot what it's called now, but it's if you just Google Sea Houses, you'd see these old pictures. It's still there, and it is a roaring trade. It's a huge thing, and you get proper smoked kippers from there. It's really famous for, and they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. They've got like all the wood and everything is all the proper wood for the smoking of the fish is there. And they've bumped up the prices quite a bit, but yeah, the proper kippers there. You can see them doing it there on the
kind of like this kind of barbecuing.
Yes,
smokehouse.
and yeah, that's what it is. And it is absolutely beautiful smoked kippers from that place. And as I say, it's still there today. It does a raw. I knew somebody who worked there a couple of years ago. But yeah, so that's another favorite. But I never caught any of them. I never caught a heron. Like
I have to ask: Are mackerel kind of like one of those thinner fish that, or like needle-like fish that put up a fight?
It's
they'll just kind of stay still, and then they'll just like jump out really fast and try and escape.
Yeah, they're not like bass. Like bass will really put up a fight, but mackerel tend to fight for a bit, then go limp when they really get tugged on. In my, albeit kind of limited experience, and they've got like a kind of black and a gold look to them. They're a very oily fish. Like, you get a lot of meat on a mackerel compared to some other ones. So like, one of the reasons why I don't like freshwater fishing is because what you catch is kind of dull. If I remember some years ago in Belgium, we did this thing where we went to they dumped a load of trout into a big pond, and you had to pay for the day. And I was pulling them out, and then you got this putty bait, the glittery putty stuff that smells. And I was just pulling the fish out of the water. Like, literally, I was catching a fish every minute because you had a limited area. It was just like a small pond. Well, it was a fair bit. I'd say it was about half the size of a football field, something. But then he dumped in like massive tanks of fish that we paid for. And then on top of that, these two fellas who knew what they were doing, we put this glittery putty stuff which stunk on the end of the hooks, and then we were casting in, and we were pulling out a fish every minute. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. That doesn't
sound very sportsmanlike.
It's nothing. It's not. It's nothing. It made me sick, and I turned around at one point because I didn't know what I was doing, and there was just like a pile of these fish like suffocating in the sun, and I just, and then afterwards, I just walked away from that feeling bad. Because I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't instructed. I didn't feel like I'd earned catching the fish. And then afterwards, these two fellas packed all the fish. They killed them all, packed them into ice, And then I was called up to one of their gardens where I had to sit the whole night and gut the fish. And there was like, I think in total, we had like 90 trout. And I was just like, where's the sport in this? And even then, I'm not really a fan of bony sort of freshwater fish either. But when you catch when you fish in the sea, you haven't got any advantage like that whatsoever, unless you're on a trawler,
Yeah,
or
like
something like that. You can start to kind of rig it against you. But if you've got a beach caster, you've got a spinning rod, which is my favorite. You really haven't got a hope in hell of catching a fish. I mean,
well,
at least I wasn't. But when you get so much as a bite, it's like a major event. And if you like land something, just even something bog standard like a mackerel or a flatfish, then okay, fair enough. Like it's an achievement.
I had to ask about mackerel because my family lake house, you can cast off of a little pier and catch a sunfish every single minute, but there's no sport. You have to go deeper into the lake and try and catch one of the favorite fish of mine is little pikes, which they're kind of like small mackerel, where they'll 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 test you, and there's a lot more of a sport to it. Um, Kind of like Moby Dick. I am actually going up to Nantucket to do a little bit of striped bass fishing. It's always it's always good sport, and if you can catch a big enough fish, nothing stops you from barbecuing it and smoking it later. It's all very good fun.
A friend of my friend of my dad's, he's getting on a bit now, like, but he's actually legendary as like a prize winning fisherman, and so much so I have to be careful because I don't want to sort of get him in trouble or anything. But he's really famous, and he catches cod in the winters.
Mhm.
That's cod season, and some of the cod that he's caught are genuinely gigantic. Like he's actually just a little fella. He's like a little tubby fella, but the cod are like bigger than his arm. Like they're huge, and
Jeez.
it's really impressive. And just on the subject of sort of fishing as sport, and what he's firstly like. So cod is a winter seasoned fish, and so you have to then do it with the tides, which is obviously another difference between freshwater and sea. Is that you have to go down, you have to kind of work with the tide,
Mhm.
and in the North Sea you get like 2 hours up, 2 hours down, is how you put it. But you like that. What he would do would be to go down in the middle of the night, like sort of say December or January, and the wind that comes in off the North Sea is bitter. It's as I always say, it'll strip the skin from your bones. It's just howling straight across like from Siberia, and it's kind of strange. It's strange temperatures on the north coast, on the northeast, because you don't get like sort of -15s and stuff for like hardly ever. But the wind is just horrible. The wind is just, I feel like Anakin when he's talking, when he's in that, it's the
Like
sand. The sand gets everywhere. In the northeast of England, on the North Sea coast, it's the wind. Like the wind will just really just kind of
well,
ruin your day.
that kind of reminds me of this story where my both my grandfather and my father were getting on the nerves of my mother and my grandmother, so the two of them just decided screw it, it might be like pouring down rain, but let's go out onto the jetty and see if we can catch anything. And you know
Yeah.
it's not about it's not about if you catch a fish, it's about proving a certain message. And there's no better type of like atmosphere than you know
Yeah.
the sportsmanship of catching something in torrential rain or torrential winds.
So this,
Natural
yeah,
challenge. Hmm.
this fella will go down at 3 o'clock in the morning on like a January with the wind and the rain just lashing in his face.
Yeah,
And
no.
what he does beforehand as well, his bait. He actually knows all of the best spots around the northeast where he digs up the best lugworm. He for years he's had like tires embedded in mud flats secretly that nobody knows about, and that's his own little personal stash. I don't know enough about it, but that is apparently where you'll get them using a tire in mud or something, and then he'll go down like an hour or four before high tide. He'll go down at low tide and have a look at where he's going to stand. And what he'll look for is a kind of dip. So in the north, where he'll go will be like sand. There's a bit of a mix on the north coast. There's a lot of rocks, but there's a lot of sand there as well. And so obviously you want to avoid the rocks because you're dealing with lead weights and like a big bait ball. And so what he'll do is look for like a dip in the sand. It's got a special name, but I can't remember. And then he'll cast. So then he goes back at high tide and he knows from where he's standing how far away the dip is, and he'll cast down into that dip. So like he's been there beforehand and scouted the lay of the land. He's worked out like how much weight will go onto the how much of a lead weight he'll need, how much, if he's going to use squid or if he's going to use lugworm or chopped mackerel or whatever. And it's all sussed out. And, you know, it'll be like 4 o'clock in the morning and he'll just be sitting by himself. But he will actually get like massive cod, huge, which is, it's just an impressive feat, to be honest.
That sounds like something, you know, the more hardcore New Englanders would do when it's, you know, like you said, freezing middle of January. They'll go out and like some of them are you know a little bit more or even more crazy and will go like surfing in the middle of the winter. And they'll, you know, in freezing freezing New England weather. It's men have hobbies.
One of the mistakes I made, one of the reasons like I'm such a bad fisherman is that I will tend to like wait for the best of weather. And what happens? I mean, I wish I knew all of this like 9 years ago or whatever. But what happens is, if we were talking about that fella when he's out in a storm in the middle of the night, that really puts a lot of oxygen into the water. So when there's a lot of oxygen goes into the water, the fish are actually very active. The fish go quite hyper because they're but when the water is very calm and it's very warm, the fish tend to go down to the bottom and almost sort of go to sleep. So the more kind of turbulent, the more churned up the water is, the more oxygen's in it, the more the fish are to kind of out and about feeding. Whereas if it's a very hot day and the water's just sort of dead calm, there's not really any oxygen in it, and the fish aren't as energetic.
Yeah, I thought like I've heard of this before, but I figured it had more to do with sediment being stirred up and the smaller fish being, you know, being more attracted to digging up sediment and bigger fish going after smaller fish. But oxidation makes more sense. It really does. And you know, it's crazy that your buddy actually tolerated, you know, such harsh conditions. Um, but it's I don't know if there's if no, I don't mean to diverge a little bit, but it, a little while ago or on Twitter, people have been talking a lot about Congressman Mike Lee selling off public lands, and I remember, you know, as a youngin, one of my first jobs was uh, preserving archival like footage and photos, and the absolute state of American fishing used to be, you know, god awful. Where some of the local places that I fish nowadays used to be completely polluted, you know, unfishable. Nothing, no life could be sustained there. One of the rare Clown World wins is the fact that the EPA was able to clean up and reforest and restock a lot of the local wildlife, and to the point where you can get very sizable fish in local waterways now. I'm not sure if it's nearly as decent nowadays in the UK as the US is now. But
It's
we've had quite a big environmentalist push to restock and revitalize, the fishing spots.
you're funny. Well, when it's in the UK, it gets complicated because
Hmm.
when fishing stocks, and it's because to do with the European Union and Brexit and everything. And it's like how much this was one of the major things, like a major discussion. Like you'll see Nigel Farage going on about this, like to this day, and it's all about like how do you divide up the catch? So like Ireland, I believe Ireland gets like royally screwed because Ireland's a small country with a small population, and they've got actually a huge amount of fishing grounds, as they call them. And I think they actually have to like hand over all kinds of sort of their what would normally be their fish, which they could trade, but it kind of gets offloaded into the wider European Union zone, if you like. But the counter argument to that will be that, well, yeah, okay, but then the Irish get wine or tomatoes from Spain or something. Um, but just on the sort of the ecological side of it, it's funny enough, it brings us all the way back where we started, because what they did in the northeast, when you mine coal, you end up with a lot of the side product, which we call slag, this kind of dust. And it becomes a nightmare for to deal with. I've spoken about this quite a lot recently. I was on AA's talking about this when it was slag heaps in North Tyneside. But another way which they dealt with it a little bit to the south in Sunderland would be where the slag, which is kind of like the slate and the rubbish that you don't want when you're mining coal, that was put into these basically just dumped at sea. And so you would have like hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of tons of it just being on these. If you've ever seen Get Caught, you actually see them where like a mile out at sea, there's this huge pillar. And then you've got this sort of pulley system with carts in, and it would just be going around, and then they would tip over when they were a mile out and dump the slag in the sea. And then it would just be this constant rotation of dumping it at sea. And of course, what that does is just blacken the whole of the coastline. So, but it's all been cleaned up since then. Yeah, that's what I mean. If you look at the photo on the top left, you can see it. So those basket things would just be full of coal, full of slag, and you can actually see the state of the coastline. It looks pretty like murky and depressing. And then, I mean, obviously, they didn't have dead bodies in, but you can see there, like he's got them on like a slag heap, and the whole of the coastline's just black with this stuff because we just couldn't get rid of it. Get Carter was made in, I think, 1971, 1972, and it's set in the northeast. And you can see how grim and depressing it looks. And part of it was the kind of the industrial sort of slant of it all. And since then, it's all been cleaned up. So I know, like, it's kind of libtard coded, but I can really appreciate it. The way they've done it. They've done a good job. You get clean beaches back. There's obviously it's an ongoing thing, especially when the population's just soaring all of the time. But another discussion for another time. You there?
Oh, yep. I'm still here. I accidentally muted myself a little while ago. I tried to interject a few times, so I was like, what's going on here? Where I'm actually from, there used to be a few like lakes that were built on top of like old coal or old iron strip mines, where you'd end up with, like you say, like slag or or like all this sort of post-industrial just junk that they just decided to fill these pits with water and dump a bunch of sand onto, and now they're these like little picturesque, like little family lakes nowadays. Like some of them even have water. But yeah, it's there are some benefits to, I guess, the current regime as is. Um, I usually go for about an hour, but kick this up to an hour and a half because it's a weekend. But I suspect in the UK it's a little bit later in the night than it is here. Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I've actually got some potatoes in the oven that I have to go and which are probably burnt to a crisp.
oh no, that's quite
out,
unfortunate.
out, out of the garden as well. I'm harvesting me garden potatoes as well. So I've
That's
like
rough.
I've had blood, sweat, and tears gone into these potatoes. If they're just a burnt crisp, I'm not going to be very happy.
Oh well, it was a pleasure having you on as always, Morgoth, and
All right,
it was a pleasure having a conversation with you. The I I will see everyone in the chat tomorrow for conversation with Iron Duke on U.S. UK relations during the U.S. Civil War. Um, Morgoth, do you have anything that you would like to shill or promote before heading out?
no, you can find me Morgoth's review on Substack and on YouTube and on Twitter as well. And yeah, that's it. So thanks a lot. If we do another nautical one, we have to get you back in classic movies.
Oh, that's a very it's very generous. That's a very generous offer. I'll take you up on it if that ever happens.
All right.
Um, I'm
So
Yep.
thanks a lot, then. Thanks in the chat.
Well, thank you everyone in the chat for bearing with us and being such a gracious and loyal audience. Thank you, Morgoth, and see you tomorrow.